All right, welcome, folks. We are going to give people a couple minutes to arrive, but while we're waiting, encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat. We have, and we'll have a good session, and when we'll keep the chat open so people have a chance to share. And let us know where you're joining us from this morning. All right, well, we're going to get going. We just have some introductions. So, Joselle, if you want to take the slide down, we can then have that down. All right. Okay, great. Great. Thanks for joining us. A couple of quick tech housekeeping notes. You'll notice that everyone is muted. And you can't unmute yourself, but that's just to make it easier for everyone to hear the speakers. We do want to actually hear from you and invite you again, as I say, to introduce yourselves in the chat function and use the chat function to ask questions, post reactions. We will have, I think we're going to have a smaller crew of people who are dedicated and particularly interested in this issue. We're recording this session. So we're going to be sharing this back out afterwards for folks who weren't able to make it. We did hear from a number of organizations and leaders who said that they were very interested in the session, but the timing didn't quite work out. But that's the miracle of this platform, is we can make that work. So I'm just going to jump in so we have time for the real stars, our speakers. My name is John Beebe, and I lead the Democratic Engagement Exchange in the Faculty of Arts at Ryerson University. I'd like to thank the Faculty of Arts and Dean Sugerman for their ongoing commitment to this work. Without their commitment to this work, none of this would be possible. I would also like to take a moment to introduce the newest member of our team, Joselle Gerardo, who will be supporting all things tech today and who is just masterful at making everything look easy behind the scenes. So thank you for being here today. Our mission at the Democratic Engagement Exchange is simple: build a vibrant and truly inclusive democracy in Canada. But that simple mission is not easy, and we can only do it with the support of dedicated community leaders and public servants like yourselves. Today's guests, Sarah Watson from North York Harvest Food Bank, Jess-Karen Gill from Elections Ontario, and Chelsea Honeyman from Elections Canada, are examples of this. People who are dedicated to building a vibrant, inclusive democracy in Canada. If you're interested in learning more about our work, and if you haven't already done so, please visit our website at engagedemocracy.ca and follow us at RUEngageX. And if you believe that this work is important and valuable, please encourage your friends and colleagues to join us as well. We literally cannot do this without you. Before I invite our guests to join us, I would like to acknowledge that the land that I have the privilege to call home is sacred land. It has been the site of human activity for more than 15,000 years. This land where I live and work is the territory of the Haudenosaunee nations, such as the Huron-Wendat, the Petun, and the Seneca, as well as the Anishinaabe, and most recently visited by the Mississaugas of New Credit. The territory later became the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe to peacefully share and care for the resources and relationships around the Great Lakes. And in this particular moment, I am powerfully reminded of the wisdom of this covenant, and that our presence here relies on all of us to take action for the collective good. I am committed to doing what I am able to support my community in this time of great need and in the future, so that generations that come after me can also enjoy this land. Today, we'll have a conversation with Sarah Watson from North York Community House. But before we do that, I would like to welcome our guests from Elections Ontario and Elections Canada to share some of the resources and materials they've developed to make it easier for folks to vote. We are very lucky here in Canada to have election management bodies that are here to help us as allies and make it easier for people to vote. I am a relative newcomer to Canada, and I come from a country just to the south of us, where that is definitely not always the case. So I appreciate their dedication and their commitment to this work. So Jaskaran, turn it over to you first.
Thank you so much, John. Hello, everyone. My name is Jaskaran Gill from Elections Ontario. I'm a public engagement and education officer. We are a nonpartisan office of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, responsible for administering by-elections and general elections in the province. We're governed by the Elections Act and the Election Finances Act, and we're committed to maintaining integrity, security, and transparency of the electoral process. Also making voting easier and accessible for all electors. And I'm here today to talk about the upcoming general election, which is June 2nd. Elections Ontario is committed to improving the voting experience for everyone by working to remove barriers such as electors who face addressing and ID challenges, accessibility needs, linguistic differences, and those who lack information about the electoral process. We provide educational resources about voting in Ontario to teachers, community organizations, and to the public at large. And we also participate in events like today's to promote active civic engagement. So Elections Ontario has identified various groups who face barriers, including those who experience homelessness. Many of these individuals do not have acceptable forms of ID, which prevent them from voting. So in lieu of ID, we accept the Certificate of Identity and Residence form. And this is issued by representatives of shelters, food banks, and community health facilities, allowing those who experience homelessness to vote. So a little bit about the process. Shelters, food banks, and community health facilities will be provided with what is called an authorization for administrators form. Administrators of the facility will authorize representatives to issue the Certificate of Identity and Residence forms on behalf of the facility. And these representatives will be listed on the authorization for administrators form. So we at Elections Ontario know who will be signing off on the Certificate of Identity and Residence forms. The Certificate of Identity and Residence form is a PDF document where the elector who is facing homelessness will fill in their name and sign, and the representative will also sign this document. Poll officials will receive the authorization for administrators form and make sure that the information matches what is on the Certificate of Identity and Residence form. Facilities will receive both the form and a how-to guide on how to fill this out in the coming weeks by the outreach team at Elections Ontario. We have a list of a database of many different organizations who service those who are experiencing homelessness, and you can expect to receive that. If you want to make sure that you're on this list, you can email us at outreach@elections.on.ca. And this way you can help make it easier for your clients to vote. The last day to return the form is May 19th, and you can do so by mail or email. And just if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. And I'll conclude just by making note of some jobs that we have available at polls, both advanced voting and on election day. Applications are open now until May 31st. So we encourage you to get the word out there and let people know that they can work the polls. And you can do so by visiting jobs.elections.on.ca, or you can let people know who are interested to visit their returning office, and they can do that once those offices open on May 4th. So thank you so much, John, for allowing me the opportunity to present a little bit about what Elections Ontario is doing and how those who are experiencing homelessness can vote. And I'll give it back to you.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thanks for everything you folks are doing. If you can share those links in the chat and your email, I think that'll probably help folks. That would be great. All right. Chelsea, over to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chelsea Honeyman, pronoun she, her. I'm happy to be calling in from slightly farther afield, it sounds like many, from unceded Algonquin territory near Ottawa. And I work with the Federal Electoral Bureau, Elections Canada, with their Inspire Democracy program, which is a program directed towards electors that face higher than average barriers to voting. Some of those barriers are related to physical accessibility, but a lot of them are information. And I'll keep what I'm saying high level because the Ontario election is a priority, and we have a similar process for electors without a fixed address, but I don't want to get too much into the details so as not to disturb from the priority that is on the Ontario election. But I will drop some links in the chat after. We have a form called a letter of confirmation of residence that certain service providers can fill out. And that's everybody from a food bank or a shelter to even like a university residence or a First Nations band administrator. Typically it's for people whose addresses change frequently. So again, I'll give some links to information about that in the chat. But the one thing I wanted to really convey is that there is an idea that if you don't have a fixed address, whether temporarily or long-term, you can't vote. And that we want to dispel that. We want to make sure that people know that they can vote if they don't have a fixed address, even if it's just for now, if you're staying with a friend or if you're between apartments or whatever, or if it's a longer term situation. We do have tools that help. One is that letter that a community organization like some who might be listening to us today can help people fill out. And the other is vouching. Vouching came back after a few elections absence. And that's essentially where you find someone who can vouch for you, who has their own identification and paperwork sorted out, but that can say, yes, I know this person by name and I know where where their address currently is. Even if it's not a permanent home address, it can be the place where you receive services, or it can be the place where you're staying at the moment. And if that person is voting in the same place as you, then they can be your voucher. And that's a great situation if you are temporarily staying with somebody. That's a great fit because you can go to the polling station with them and get yourself vouched for that way. So while I know at a federal election, especially after yesterday's news, who knows when the next federal election will be, I thought it's important to keep the conversation going because once an election gets underway, we all know there's a real information overload. So with that in mind, I'll put my address and the Inspire Democracy Program's website and address in the chat, along with a couple of relevant links. So you can stay in touch and feel free to contact us at your convenience and leisure. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. And I think just to your point, the election that was coming up and that we're focused on is with Elections Ontario. And they do not have a vouching system, but they do really, like Elections Canada, are determined to make sure that everybody who is qualified to vote, that means all you have to do if you're a Canadian citizen and you're over 18 years of age, you are qualified to vote in Canada, and you should be able to vote. And so in some situations that might take more advanced planning and some effort on your part to make sure you can document who you are and what your address is. But I can say that Elections Ontario, Elections Canada are both there to help you do that. And the earlier you can do that in the process, the better. Everything you need to know is on their websites. And so if you have questions, if you go to their website, you still have questions, give them a call. Like they have a phone number. There's a person who will answer on the other end of the line. I've done this. And so, and especially earlier rather than later, I would really encourage you to do that. And if you work for an organization, reach out to these folks. They're there. They want to work with you to help your community. So again, hats off to our guests here. And now I will they're sticking around, that they'll be able to answer questions at the end. But I'm going to invite Sarah in to share some of her experience and the experience of North York Harvest in doing outreach and engagement in their communities. So thank you. And then I think So Sarah, I want to welcome you. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been an incredibly challenging 2 years that North York Harvest and all of us have been through, but you folks in particular. And so I just want to thank you for being here, taking the time. And then also, I know that even in the midst of all that challenge, you have been doing voter outreach and engagement work. And so wanted to hear from you a little bit about how the last couple of years have gone, and why you've stayed involved in this work, and are here with us.
John, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really happy to do this. We've been doing vote pop-ups since we figured out earlier since 2015, since we first started doing them, and we've done them, I think, for every election, municipal, provincial, federal, since then. So we're pretty committed to it. It's become a real big part of our community engagement and advocacy work. So it's been really important to us. This has been it's been a rough couple of years for everyone. But we were able to do the vote pop-up work and the community engagement work throughout. One of the things, as a food bank, we were declared an essential service. So we have never stopped doing frontline programming through this whole time. We do it very differently than we were doing it pre-COVID. We have a lot of health and safety protocol in place. So things don't happen quite the way they used to, and quite the way we wish they would, but we're hoping we'll get back to that pretty soon. But I think, and not to jump too far ahead, so please let me know, but it was particularly important for us in this last federal election to make sure that we were able to continue doing the vote pop-ups. One, because we do think they're so important, but two, and I think one of the big reasons organizations that are community-based, food banks, drop-ins, shelters, what have you, they can play such a critical role in this because they have a trust and they have a reach. And during this, difficult period, so many of us were still on the ground doing this work when there weren't a lot of folks who were able to do that. So we've worked really closely with our community members for years. So there's a trust, and they're willing to have sort of conversations with us, and we learn from each other. So they're open to these conversations. And there's a reach, our programs, we're the primary food bank for all of Northern Toronto. So we directly operate 4 frontline programs, but we also have 37 member agencies that operate programs as well. So in an average month right now, our programs see about 20,000 visits. So we touch a lot of people, and we have really strong relationships with those folks. And in a sector like ours, we're working in areas of the city that have particularly low voter turnouts generally. There are areas with the lowest median incomes and among the highest food bank usage. These are our communities. So it's a real opportunity to make a difference and to really engage people who otherwise might not participate.
Yeah, I mean, now obviously I'm convinced that work is important, but what do you say to folks who think, okay, well, your job is to help people who are facing food insecurity. Yes, people should vote, but let's focus on dealing with issues around food insecurity. Do you hear that? And then how do you respond?
That's a great question. So we are a food bank. So sort of our main day-to-day work is either providing frontline programs with the food that they use in their emergency food programs or running emergency food programs ourselves. And we've been doing that work for 36-ish years. We're one of the first food banks in Canada. But a big part of our mission is not just to meet that immediate need, which is incredibly important. People don't have the food they need right now today. So they need the support of the food bank to be able to feed themselves and their families in this very moment. But we're also very committed to long-term change. And we know that handing out hampers of food, while it does meet that critical immediate need, it doesn't stop people from being food insecure in the long run. And we know that very, very well, because here in Toronto anyway, and I know it's not true for all over for all of the world, certainly, and even parts of this province, and parts of Canada, and particularly in the north, there's no shortage of food here. People aren't food insecure because there's not enough food. People are food insecure because they don't have the money they need to purchase the food that they and their family need. People are food insecure because they are poor. So if we're committed to ending food insecurity in the city, we need to be committed to ending poverty. And so we now really position ourselves as an anti-poverty organization. That's how we're going to achieve our goals. And to end poverty, you need some serious systemic change. And so there are different ways we approach this. We sort of approach it on a three-tiered level. There's what we can do as an organization, sort of, capital O organization. We can try to meet with elected officials. We can do reports and research. We can organize campaigns. And then with our member agencies, we can try to give them the tools to do the same. But one of, I think, the most important things that we can do is work with those thousands and thousands of people that we see each month to make sure that they feel empowered to take action and control out of this on the things that are impacting their lives, or to have a voice, because many don't feel that they do. Many do. We have incredibly empowered and involved folks in our communities, but a lot of folks don't. And really, who better to speak out on the issues that are impacting them when it comes to food insecurity or poverty than people who are directly experiencing those themselves. They have a far better understanding of what those barriers are, what changes need to be made, than I do. So if we can create space or a platform or amplify voices for our community members, I think that's one of the most impactful things we can do as an organization to achieve our goals.
And so what do those conversations look like? When you're talking with folks during election periods, and, are you providing information about, like what we talked about earlier, sort of the mechanics of voting, how to make sure you have the appropriate ID or able to, demonstrate who you are, or are you talking about the issues that matter to them? Like what does that look like in practice?
So a lot of it is mechanics. A lot of, especially for people who've never voted before or have never voted in Canada before, it can be a really intimidating process. So just sort of going through that and practicing, and showing that there really isn't too much to it. It's pretty straightforward once you've had the chance to sort of walk through it. It becomes a lot less intimidating for people. And also making sure folks have the information. Our participants have a lot going on. They're really busy. Some of them have 2 or 3 jobs. They're dealing with childcare. They're doing with all sorts of extra things. So something as simple as making sure that people know where to vote, what to bring and when, makes a huge difference. So at all of our vote pop-ups, we do have laptops, and we give them that information. So they leave knowing where, when, and what they need to bring to the polling station. And it really makes a big difference. And it's been in particular around COVID, because a lot of those things have changed. So there are people who are used to always knowing where their voting station was, but there had to be a lot of changes because schools, for example, were a big place where people would often vote, and they couldn't have polling stations in the schools. So, just something like that, like showing up thinking you're knowing where to go and it's not there, you might have a really small window that you can vote in of time. And you've got the idea that you've got to figure out where you're actually supposed to go, and that it might be farther away. That might be enough to stop someone from voting. So making sure they have all that information. There's also a lot of myths around who can vote and what you need. And a lot of things that sort of flow over from south of the border. Folks think that if they have a criminal record, they can't vote, which, isn't true here. That if they don't have an address, as we spoke about earlier, that they can't vote. And, we can provide a letter of confirmation of residence, as was spoken to. that they have to be on the voter list. You know, in the States, we get so much media from the
Yes.
States, but the idea that you have to be registered to vote, and if you're not on the list, you can't vote, that's not true. Makes it easier for sure. Or that you have to have that voter card to vote. These are all things that people believe or have been told or have assumed. And so just making sure that they understand really what the process is can make a really big difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been our experience with the vote pop-ups, like the physicality, being able to walk through and physically do it, and then people realizing, oh, wait a second, that's much easier than I thought it was going to be. And so demystifying, yeah, it's great. And as you say, you know, a lot of the folks you're working with and in your communities may have particular barriers that, you know, it helps to have somebody say, okay, you know, here's exactly where to do it. A little shout out for Elections Ontario here. They're going to make it even easier for us this time because they're doing 10 days of advanced voting. They're not going to not every single advanced voting location will be open all those 10 days, but they're making it really easy by providing a lot of options. And then within your electoral district, you will be able to vote at any advanced voting location. And so that's a new thing that is going to be, again, make it this convenient for folks to vote, as long as, of course, they have the appropriate ID, but they will be able to do that. And then that's, you know, those are the kind of new information we want to get out and make sure everybody has access to. Then in terms of, you know, talking about the issues, because you said, I think you brought up something really important about like, why do this work, and making sure that people in our communities who are most impacted by the challenges we're facing, people who really been most impacted by these last 2 years, have a voice in, you know, shaping their communities, shaping who's representing them. Like when you have those conversations around the issues that people are important, or how, you know, they see their elected representatives, what do you hear in those conversations?
Well, it really ties into, I think, the way that we actually run our vote pop-ups. So it's really important that these remain nonpartisan, and we don't have parties on our ballots, and we don't talk about parties in particular through the practice process. One, because it's important that it's nonpartisan. Two, because it's private. And we want to encourage as many people to participate as we can, and we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable or be like, you know, I don't want to talk about this, you know, so I'm not gonna do this. So what we do for our ballot is we ask the question of what's something that's important to them in this election? What is something that's really impacting their lives that's important to them in the election? And this is a good question because it still can tie people's hopes and concerns to the election and really underline, like, this is a way to take action on these things. It's a really, really good opportunity. But it's also, and if you ask a question that's important to people, they're more likely to answer. So if we asked, you know, we're a food bank, so like, what's your favorite food? Spaghetti or pizza or fish? You know, you still get that process, but there's not going to be as much engagement, and people are excited to tell you what matters to them because it matters. So an opportunity to do that is important. And then it's great for us because it gives us a window into what things do matter the most to our community members. So that helps us when we develop programming or, you know, guides advocacy work that we do. So we will ask things like housing, healthcare, childcare, social assistance, general sort of topics, but that we know have some level of importance to our community members. And we can underline in conversation that this is a really good opportunity to make your voice heard on these issues. And it gives us a window into what's important in our community members' lives.
And I'm curious too, then, from a staff point of view, you know, like how do you staff these activities, and how does the staff react to taking these on? Because I know, you know, some people, as you mentioned, saying, oh, well, it's politics. I don't really want to talk about politics, and you know, that's contentious issue. I'm here. I want to work with the community members. I want to support them. This what's been the reaction from your staff to this work?
I mean, my team loves it. We're the community engagement team. This is what we do. This is our, if my team didn't like engaging with community members, they wouldn't be able to, they probably wouldn't hang around too long. So, you know, it works for us. But, you know, we love to have those relationships with our participants. We love those opportunities. And often our participants are looking for opportunities to engage more and to have their voices heard. So creating those opportunities is really good, but it can be intimidating. You know, I think the first year we did it, we kind of tried to just like set up a table and like wait politely for people to approach us. And that didn't work so well. You know, you have to be out there, you have to engage. We always have like some kind of food. We're a food bank. We do food stuff like to bring people in. Everybody loves food's a great tool, you know, beyond the sustenance and important. It's a great community building tool. So we always have some sort of snacks. And we often get the vote buttons and we can give those away. People love stuff. No one can resist. So, you know, we sometimes have to draw people in. But people like having their opinion asked. People like having the opportunity to share. And for, you know, there's a lot of people in our community who are not used to being asked these questions. So they're excited about the opportunity. So I think there can always be a bit of shyness at first, but once you get into the rhythm of it, it's great. And some people just don't want to participate, and that's fine. There's no requirement. But it's great. And you know, we don't just engage people who are able to vote. You know, we have some younger people come through and it's like, well, why don't you practice now and then you're ready? Or people who are new to Canada but can't vote yet. Again, like, do you want to learn about the process that we have here? And then if you can vote one day, then you know what to do. And it also, you know, lets us gather a little bit more information from a wider group of people. Because if you're going to have this opportunity to ask a question, ask something that matters, you know.
Yeah, that it's definitely one of my favorite parts about the vote pop-up is, you know, everybody can participate. Anybody, like we've had, you know, we've set up in libraries, set up in community centers where, you know, we've had people visiting from different countries who have participated just to learn about what voting is like in Canada. And you know, and we call people who are under 18 and new people who are not yet citizens. We say, well, you're a future voter. You know, you can come vote in this practice. Yes, and we have my little voter stickers that are going to go out with the vote pop-up kits here. And Joselle will pop the order form for the vote pop-up kits in the chat here. You can order them now. We're going to be shipping them within the next 10 days. So you can get your kit to run it. It's all free and it includes everything you need to run your vote pop-ups, including stickers. And I think, you know, that question, yeah, about sort of listening. I mean, one of the things that we've heard when we ask people what matters to you is sort of nobody's ever asked me that question before. And you know, it does really powerfully connect people to the election. And instead of starting by sense that, oh, well, you should vote here, learn how to vote, but starting with what matters to them. Same way, you know, in 2015, when we both started this, it was like, oh, well, you know, like, we're going to talk to you about the election. And we got also similar responses like, yeah, I'm busy. But then if you start with a question, you open up that conversation and get people to connect their interests. Super powerful. In terms of like the barriers that do exist, what do you see as the biggest barriers to community members to participating in elections?
There are a few fold. I think that a lot of folks just feel disenfranchised. A lot of our community members face a lot of barriers in their day-to-day. They have challenges that are not their fault. You know, there's a lot of systemic issues and systemic problems that make life really challenging in this city and across the country for people. And folks are frustrated and they don't necessarily feel like it's going to make a difference because they maybe have voted in the past or they've been through many elections, and some of the things that are impacting them aren't changing. And it's, it's hard. It can be hard to tell people otherwise or convince them otherwise, or, because they're correct, for a lot of folks, the things that they have been struggling against haven't changed or have gotten worse, whether they've voted or not. So, that's a big challenge.
And how do you respond to that? Because I think we of course, and we've all heard this. We've all, some of us have felt this. How do you respond to someone who says, "Hey, this doesn't make a difference. Things never change."
Yep. It can be hard. You can't always convince them. You try to point to examples of where voting or people coming together to fight for something have worked, and show them examples of when it does. One of the things that we do, we're really lucky to have some partners who help supply us with this. In the provincial election, the provincial food bank body, Feed Ontario, put together spreadsheets that showed with some of the big issues that they suspected our participants and community members would be interested in, and outlined where the different major parties stood on those. And they got that information either directly from the party platforms or from the parties themselves. They would submit sort of a questionnaire and we get it back, and it would just be presented, all the answers, everybody's information, and just giving folks the opportunity to see where their thoughts and feelings and opinions actually maybe did align, or who best represented them. Because I think for a lot of people, they feel like nobody represents them. So seeing the particulars, that could be helpful as well.
Yeah, and I think just simply recognizing that it is challenging and that their concerns are legitimate is really powerful, and that we try to think about democratic engagement and political engagement as a spectrum too, that it's not like an on-off switch. And so we know that when we have some of those conversations, that we're moving folks along the spectrum. Now, they may not go to voting, but they're like maybe thinking about it a little differently, planting some seeds. We're sort of hoping they're planting seeds, and letting people hear from each other about what the issues are. Do you host, or how do you connect people to candidate forums or other ways for people to hear from the candidates?
So, we will, if we know about town halls or debates or what have you that are happening in catchments, we'll put up posters and things like that. But we try to make sure we'll only do it if it's like a nonpartisan event, when there's representation, and we don't invite candidates into our spaces generally, because it's just not appropriate. We have thought about hosting our own debates. We haven't gone that route up at this point. We may in the future. But we're just really committed to making sure that we're just presenting all of the information. This is not an area where we are trying to advocate for a specific outcome or a specific person or party. We're really just trying to support our community members to feel empowered so that they can take action on the things that are impacting their lives, and they can see how it does connect. They can see how the electoral process does connect with the things that are important to them.
So we're about to go to questions. So I just want to cue that up to everyone who's with us here today. Please use the chat to ask questions, and they can be directed at Sarah or Chelsea or just Karen. So please put those in the chat there, and if we have we can try to, if people would like to ask their own questions, they're welcome to do so, but we're also happy just to ask on your behalf. But before we go to questions from everyone else here, wanted to, another piece that we you know, we know we want to stay nonpartisan. And I think you articulated that really well in saying that people feel intimidated by the partisanship, and so that actually can be a barrier. And so by staying nonpartisan, it actually makes a more inclusive space. But what do you say when someone asks straight up, like, who should I vote for? I think you talked about how you're trusted, how you have these trusted relationship with community members. So they may look to you or the staff to say, hey, we trust you guys. You're smart. You follow this stuff. Who should I vote for?
So we will not tell people how to vote or who to vote for. That's really important. It's just not our place ever. So, we'll ask people to think about what are the issues that do matter to them the most. We'll show them the info sheets we have, and we'll say, well, here's the column on housing. See who you think reflects your opinions on housing the most. We, give them, resources to become more engaged. Here's people who you might want to follow, or here's where the websites for your parties are, or, here are the candidates, you can reach out to them and ask them these questions, or their teams these questions, but just creating the connections, but not trying to influence actual decisions. We do advocacy work throughout the year, and we do things that are more specifically targeted and are looking for very specific policy changes. And, if folks are particularly interested, we'll encourage them to join us in that work. But when it comes to this, we really want to encourage folks to come to their own decisions. And sometimes that can be tricky because we know, sometimes to us, we're like, oh, I think you're going to make a decision that I don't think makes the most sense for what your concerns are. But it's not my place to say that. We want to get as many people voting in our communities as possible. We want to ensure that our communities' voices are represented in government, because right now they disproportionately are not. So that's a big first step. And if we can do that, then our community members are going to see how their voices do matter and do make a difference and do impact government and the electoral system.
So I'm going to ask a difficult question, we struggle with it as well. But so you've been doing this for a while now. Have you seen change either within your community or how people connect with you, or how elected officials connect with you over this time period since 2015?
Yes, absolutely. I think we're more engaged, more deeply engaged with our community members. They look to us more on these issues than they did before. I suspect some of them are watching for the pop-ups now because we've been doing them so much. And I think we are a go-to organization for our members of parliament and our city councilors and our, all our government officials in a way that we weren't. And I think a lot of that is also the result of the last 2 years. Food insecurity has really become an issue of focus, as have many things that have people struggling on low incomes. There's just a lot of issues that have been there all the time, but COVID has really shone a light on them, and they're getting some attention that they weren't getting before. So we do hear from our elected officials in a way that to a degree that we hadn't previously, and have their ears a little bit more, and make sure that they know how our community members are feeling, that there is disengagement, that they need to be included, that we need to see them on the ground in our communities, that it's important.
Yeah, I think that's amazing to hear. I mean, we talk in our work about building a culture of engagement, and culture change takes time. I mean, that's not something you turn on and off. And I think that's the fact that people are now sort of recognizing and expecting the vote pop-ups. I mean, that makes my heart sing. But we have a great question from Miranda here, about how to engage newcomer or immigrant communities who are not yet eligible to vote. I mean, we talked a little bit about they can participate in the vote pop-ups, but either younger people or somebody who's not yet a citizen, are there ways to engage them, or things that you've done that you think have worked?
I think just encouraging them to go through the process is great. And I think especially with new Canadians, a lot of them are really excited to learn about our process and how things work. So they're excited to just try it out. And just because folks can't vote doesn't mean they're not interested in learning. So we do have those resources so that they can sort of follow along and be engaged in other ways. And we encourage people to stay connected with us because, as I say, we do things all through the year. This is what we do at election time, but there's lots of ways to be engaged. And, even if you can't vote, that doesn't mean if you're excited about the electoral process, maybe you want to work on a campaign, maybe you want to volunteer. There's lots of different ways that you can get involved. As someone who's young or as a newcomer, there's great opportunities.
Yeah, I always encourage people to volunteer or get involved on a campaign because it's an incredible networking opportunity for jobs and skill development and just learning about your community.
Sorry, John, I'd also just like to add that newcomers can work poll jobs, and that's a great way to learn about elections. So if you come across anyone who is interested, again, would like to encourage you. And we do have resources on our website as well that you can direct them to.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. Actually, that came up for us in another setting. So just to clarify, so any of the jobs, what are the qualifications that you need to work for Elections Ontario? Jessica, if you want to. Oh, no, cannot hear for some reason. No, I don't hear. Okay, right. But let's try again. Is it working? Lana. Okay. Nope, I can't hear, but so maybe answer in the chat. Thank you. Okay, but because I know for Elections Canada, and Chelsea, you can correct me here, but Elections Canada does have some requirements that people be eligible electors for some of the jobs, if not most of the jobs.
Yeah, citizenship is required to be for most poll worker or electoral officer jobs. Age, it's starting to loosen up a bit. 16-year-olds can apply for certain jobs. They just tend not to get the ones that like administrator in the returning office, that kind of thing. So there's a bit more expansion for like that new voter in the 16-year-old direction, not so much for the citizen element. So it was great to hear that Elections Ontario has slightly different requirements. Didn't want to confuse things by jumping in there with my
I just want yeah, and Candace raised a really good point here, Sarah, that I think you see it here in the chat, but how can with all the challenges that people are facing around staffing, how much does it take to organize, and how to tips to make it easier, and yeah, you want to speak to that?
I hear you, Candace. We all have too much to do, and I feel like now more than ever, I think that my job seems to be twice what it was 2 years ago. So it can be tricky, and then there's always another thing you could be doing. But I would say two things. I would say one, the kits that John and team put together, there's a full kit and a guide, step by step. Everything is there. It's amazing. Get it. It does most of the work for you. And then there's great supplies that you could get from the elections teams. It's really well thought out. It's very straightforward. It's just a really simple thing to do. It does take some work, no doubt, but not as much as you might think. It's also a great opportunity to engage volunteers. So if you have volunteers that are particularly excited in this work, it's a really good thing to do. We have usually have one staff person sort of overseeing the coordination, but the on the ground is often done by volunteers. Not in the last 2 years, just we've been working less with volunteers because of COVID, but in a typical year, our pop-ups might be completely volunteer run, the on the ground work. It's totally within the capacity of a volunteer to do. It's great if you can have staff. It's great to be able to pay people for the jobs that they do. But it's a really fun volunteer opportunity, and people get a lot out of it.
Yeah. I would say that the Young Leader Development Program at the YMCA, they had newcomer youth. So they were under 18 and they weren't yet citizens. They were running the vote pop-ups. And so young people, are like people who are not yet 18, are great people to run vote pop-ups because nobody can say no to them. They're so great and they're so enthusiastic and they're super smart. They're more than capable to answer some core questions, point people to resources, and engage their community. So if you have young people in your program or volunteers who are young people, they are awesome. Or people who aren't yet citizens are also great advocates. We were working at Central Neighborhood House, and there was a woman there who was running the vote pop-ups, and I was talking to her, asking her about her background and experience. She was incredibly articulate about the importance of voting and getting involved and knew all the rules. She had arrived from Sudan as a refugee 6 months prior to running that program. She was out there leading it after being in Canada for 6 months. And but she was incredibly passionate and powerful about the importance of electoral engagement. So yeah, there's lots of ways to engage staff on that front. And as Jessica and Chelsea were pointing out here, their staff with the elections offices, election management bodies are also able to help and support in some cases. So especially if you reach out to them earlier, you have specific asks or specific times, like I'd encourage you to connect with them, and they may be able to provide some support as well. Although they are, also, I will say, covering a lot of terrain and got a lot of moving pieces, so I don't want to over commit them to the outreach. Please keep questions coming. I don't know, Patricia, if you would like to jump in here, you also feel free to unmute yourself. Patricia is on the team here and our champions.
I just want to say thank you. This is a great session, and especially Sarah's work, I think, is incredibly valuable because with more voters coming from your communities and the communities who you serve, I think that hopefully then politicians, and I put of all stripes, will pay attention to the issue of poverty. You can't ignore it if people are out there demanding and voting and making a difference. So thank you so much for it's incredible work. It's really important work, and thanks to all of you today.
No, thank you. Yeah, Sarah. There's we're sharing resources here in the chat. But Sarah, in terms of wrapping up here, if you were giving advice to an organization like that's just starting up with this, in terms of like starting points, because 90% of the folks who we work with and who attend our training say they've never done this kind of work before. So for many organizations, it's still new territory. What would you sort of like say, like, okay, you're giving a great shout out for the vote pop-up, but what's a good advice to sort of get going?
I think, again, get the kit, because the kit's going to do most of the work for you. And ask a question that matters to you and to your community, because that's going to be, people are just going to get engaged so much more quickly. You're going to get so much out of it, and it's just going to double the impact of the work you're doing. It's a really great starting point, in particular because it is nonpartisan. You're not you're not trying to move a specific policy. You don't have to be an expert in all things. I think that can be really intimidating for people when they're starting this kind of civic engagement work, is worrying that they're not going to know the answers. Well, you don't have to have all the answers. A very specific set of information that you have, it's in the kit. That's what you need. And then the rest is just listening and trying to create space for people to be heard. And for a lot of folks, that space doesn't come around as often as it should. So it's a really great way to deepen your relationships with your community members, to get a better understanding of them, and to get your foot in the water of this work. I really think it's a great starting point. And yeah, if anybody does have further questions after today, I'll put my email in the chat and our social tags. So please follow us and ask me any questions. I love to talk about this kind of stuff. It's really important.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Yeah, and so last call on questions from the audience here. But if not, we have recorded this session. So if you know folks who would be interested, we'll be making that available, and we'll follow up with folks here to let you know when the video is available to upload. I think that that concept of starting with the question is it's incredibly simple and incredibly powerful. And so we really appreciate that piece. And then demystifying the voting process. I mean, again, we're super lucky in Canada where, for most people, voting is pretty easy. And for folks who may, have a harder time proving their address or something, there are people, who are standing by to support them and help them make it easier, or who have particular accessibility needs or other particular needs. There are folks who are here, standing by to help. And we can't leave it up to our political parties to sort of get out the vote. They will get out their voters, but they're not going to be trying to get out everyone. So I really appreciate the work you folks are doing, and the work everybody on this call is doing to support that. And thanks everybody again for joining us today. Sarah's already given a shout out to our vote pop-up kits. We are going to be offering trainings as well. And so for folks who may be new to this, please come to a training. The trainings are also free. We're going to be doing trainings in Toronto, in London, in Sudbury, and in Ottawa in April. And we've, all of those resources, Joselle has shared them in the chat, and you can register for those trainings and share those with your networks. Not only, even if you're familiar with voting, and some of this work will have updates on the latest from Elections Ontario as part of that. And you'll also be able to just pick up your kit right there and head off with that. So, but with that, I want to just again thank everybody, and we will be in touch. Make sure you've signed up for our newsletter, because there's more resources and materials yet to come. But appreciate everyone being here today. All right. Thank you all.